is going to be very formal.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming in today. Spend part of your, what day is it even? Friday?
Yes,
Friday afternoon with us. My name is Bryn Durgan. I'm Director of Programming at Bookstore One. Thank you for being here again. And welcome in. Let me introduce you to the person that, of course, you are here to see. He will be in conversation, by the way, with the owner of the bookstore, Georgia Court. Sitting right there. And this is the author of the book that's available for purchase right downstairs. This is my story, this is my song. He is dedicated to being a change agent and bridge builder for his African American community, and he shares the challenges he faced during the Jim Crow era in Alabama and how he turned those challenges into opportunities. As we journey with him from 1940s Mobile, Alabama to Chicago and on to Atlanta, we not only get a sweeping overview of the history, a vicarious travelogue experience, and the grit and conviction of the man who cannot help but be inspired by the impact and legacy of a man who has dedicated his life to service in his community. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Willie H. Clemons.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to be talking today about Dr. Clemons' book. And here it is, and it is downstairs, and I have just read it, and I recommend it. It's an interesting memoir of a long life of service, dedicated to service, and it's a very interesting and inspiring book, I think. And I congratulate you on writing this book and taking the time to share your experiences with people. And in the book, you point out that what's most important was to you, and you think for the youth of today, the idea is to keep good company, get a good education, and that's really kind of the key. But one of the things that came through in this book also was that you grew up in a very supportive environment, not wealthy, but supportive, where the community looked out for each other. Do you see that happening today in our communities, whether it's the African American communities or any other community? Do you see that happening today, and what are you seeing out there?
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Georgia, for inviting me along with Bryn and others here. And it is a pleasure to be here in your company and in the bookstore, which I've heard so much about. And again, before I answer, I wanted to first just publicly thank you for the invitation. Yes, I start off by saying that I was raised on love. Love was the center of my being, and that helped to propel me to where I am today. And sure, there were many challenges and circumstances that I grew up with in the Jim Crow South, but it was through love and the community support that to help propel me and to give me the sort of support that I needed to succeed. So the community was invaluable for my success. But the center of that community was the church. And the church was the key vehicles for us as African Americans, because that was really one of the only places where we could exhibit our own independence, our freedom from thinking, and all of that. And
does that culture exist today?
I think
does it
that
still
the
exist?
culture, no, not to that extent. I think that's the missing link. And you don't find the same kind of support that existed during that time in the particular community for whatever reason. But the answer is no, not to that extent.
Well, where do you think that today's youth can go to get the kind of support and mentoring that you know, what do you recommend that communities do? And as I'm saying, communities of all races, I think, are having this issue that you're talking about.
To get my book. That is
Good answer.
the answer.
Good answer.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons what propelled me to write the book. And I'll pause in a second and saying that it was really through my two amazing daughters and my best friend and wife that suggested that I write the book. But it was for that particular reason, because of the fact that what we're finding in our communities is an increase, and especially with youth, in drugs and crime and suicide, and high school dropout rates are lower. So it's really created an environment that needs a strong solution. The solution for me, because the environment existed, was the community. The community helped shape that. And so that isn't existing. And the answer to your question, what do? Is that we have to take ownership here and begin to do the things that I'm doing. Many of the things that some of the other organizations and some of the churches are doing in terms of community outreach. And create these kinds of programs for that. I think that one of the things that happened, Georgia, is that there are programs, but if you notice that they are more socially based, or in the sense that they're sports related or something along that particular line, what our experience, and although that existed, but it was more from a mentoring, a personal interest. When I grew up, my neighbor had the full authority to reprimand me. So if they saw me out doing something wrong, they had the responsibility. The school had the responsibility of giving me the guidance and all of that. So it was coming from all people who were really interested in me and my welfare. We don't find that happening today, and so we have to try to look at alternatives to be able to do that.
Yeah, you were, you mentioned that what was so important to you was keeping good company, as I mentioned earlier, and that some of your peers did not manage to keep good company. So what was there, because they're growing up in the same supportive community, what was there about you and how you viewed life, or how your family viewed life, that allowed you to make sure you were hanging with the right people?
Well, yeah. It still comes back to the core of the whole value system, and as I said, that was emanated through the church, and of really following those principles, love my neighbor as myself, and many of the principles that are spiritually based. And so although all of us and most of us got those experiences, there's always, just like it is the opposite. There's something that looks more attractive, that may not be as glamorous as what you're trying to do. And you begin to ask the question, well, I'm doing the right thing, but here's Joe Blow over here who is doing this and not making these sacrifices and doing all of that.
And he's having a heck of a good
time.
time.
A heck of a time. Why are you here? And so that's what it is, but it is what created the difference here. You had people that said, oh no, you're not going to do that, or if this happens, we're going to go and to deal with you and your parents and so forth. All of that was a part of it. The teachers were not only there in the classrooms, but they were in the community. And so it was an ongoing process that existed. It was a community initiative that does not. And so dealing with relationships, it was key that we were consistently instilled, no, maybe you are needing to do this as opposed to going to that, because if you do this is the consequence, and consequences that will happen as a result of that. And so I had strong counselors and support system mentors that helped guided me in that particular direction. I was willing to accept that. Those who did not choose to do something else, and it's a choice. And, you know, that you have. I don't think it's any different today in the sense of choices that we have, and we make those decisions. But I think the issue is that we sometimes are not prepared to deal with the consequences, and that's what you're seeing as a result of that.
Or to do the work to get the good consequences.
Absolutely.
As a result. But you know, as a young person, you grew up with challenges. I think if I recall in the book that I think your dad died fairly young. Your mom was working away from home. So, and you were raised by grandparents and then aunts and uncles and so forth. And, you know, that's a challenge in itself.
Absolutely.
But what would you say, you know, looking at the young part of your life, let's say up to 21 or whatever, what was your biggest challenge, and how did you handle that?
Well, the challenge were many in that sense, and the growing up, as I said, in an environment where you see things that were appealing, that sort of help define who you could be, and you're looking at it without really understanding all the things that go along in terms of making that happen. Obviously, you grow up, if you are, say, poor, if you don't have, you say, well, I want to be rich. I don't want to live in poverty. I don't want those kinds of things to happen. But without really understanding how to make those happen. I think that the point, though, in response to your question is that I was able to turn, which is part of the theme of my book, oppositions into opportunities, and that made the difference. So regardless to what existed during that time, which was, as I said, I grew up in the segregated South, that I was not able to do this. We had secondhand books. We did all of those sorts of things that you know about in the South at that particular time. We lived in an environment that was certainly segregated in terms from a racism perspective, and we looked at things that happened. We had to operate on a different set of rules. Those were oppositions. And so for those who didn't see the fact that there's a better way of life in terms to do, they let those oppositions define them. It did not define me, and that was because of the community of people that helped to do that. I wanted to do the same thing. I was headed down the same road, but it was that, say, coming back to that love and that support that was given me by those individuals across the board throughout my particular life. I always had that. It's fine. But I still think, and I say this often, that the role of the church is significant. The role of the school is significant. And I think that the concerns that happen today is that you have a different concept of what that role looks like. If you noticed, and as we talk about Black History Month, which we are in, and you look at our leaders, and as we're celebrating, say at my church, the Church of the Redeemer, the celebration of the life and legacy of Martin Luther King, that his whole thing was spiritually based, and his whole movement there to really, really change the dynamics of this particular community and country where people work together. And so that emanated from the church. And you know, all of the civil rights leaders, not all, but the majority of them come out of the church, following those principles. And I think what has happened, those principles have been removed. We don't pray in the school anymore. We don't do any of those kinds of things as such that helps to define us. We don't love our neighbor as ourselves. We don't do those. And so as a result of that, here are the consequences.
Yeah.
And I think that tends to say, so if you look at the challenges, I mean, there were many. I mean, I could certainly name in terms of this, and without getting into the political, the racism, the sexism. I mean, you name those were challenges, and are challenges for us as African Americans. But how do we overcome those? How do we turn
Martin
those
Luther
into
King's
opportunities?
word, overcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what I think. And so what I've tried to do here in this book is to give those, because we're not getting, and that we don't have the level of community today. Here's an alternative, that here's someone that are having the same challenges that I'm having, and here's some things that they did to overcome them. That's what it is. I say this, and I'm going to address your question. I tell people, I didn't go to bed one night and then wake up the next day being Dr. Clemons. So this is the way that I got from Mobile, Alabama, from just a working class family. My mother finished high school. My grandfather, who I was grade school, went to third grade, and all of that. So I didn't come from the family that my daughters now are experiencing.
And they're taking it for granted, right?
Yeah, then absolutely.
This
That
generation,
comes
right.
with it. I mean, that's why, as we say, that we find that a lot of our friends, our kids are coming back home because going out on their own, they're finding that they can't maintain the quality of life that they've grown accustomed to.
Right, I know.
So they kind of want to get back into what they have been definitely. Right. So, but anyway.
What they were expecting.
Yeah, absolutely.
You make a point in the book too. You said, I wrote it down, you said failure is not permanent. And I love that concept. Can you talk about a time that you failed and you came back from it, and how did you do it, and how did that help you in the end?
Oh, I've had a lot of failures. I think that one of the things is really coming to recognize that the being denied, that somewhat when I applied for various positions and didn't get it, and I saw that in some instance as a failure, or that I have worked very, very hard to get it to complete various sorts of projects, and that has not been completed, and I consider that as a failure at that point. But the difference is based upon my whole spiritual piece and what I grew up with, and recognizing that these were, say, challenges more so than failures. And if you follow your spiritual guidance, you realize that sometimes that things happen to you I believe that things happen to you for a reason. And if you recognize it and put it in that context, then you don't accept it as you being a failure. You see it some instances as an opportunity. And that's what I've done, of looking at those experiences that I had that have been viewed, or very easily viewed, as failure, in some instances as opportunity for something better. And I think that that's the message that we have to instill upon our particular of the youth, because they say, well, I failed a class in high school. I mean, which in college or whatever. What do I do? What do I deal with that? Do I go and jump out the window, or do I really look at, well, maybe I need to look at another strategy, or what's the message that is coming, has come as a result of this? So I think it's those kinds of things that we have to employ. Not only we're talking about youth, but this book is designed for anyone who is experiencing challenges, which we all face, and how do we deal with these, and how do one sort of handle those things, very similar situations, and then move forward. So there are many, many instances, Georgia, that I can point to in my life that I said, okay, fine, this is a failure, but I didn't allow that to define me.
This discussion reminds me of something, the failure discussion, and I want to just get your opinion. It has nothing to do with your book, in a way, but it's a question, and it goes back to children and very young people and the idea of failure. And what I'm seeing so much, because I've had kids, they're grown up now, but as they were little kids, everybody gets a trophy. Do you know the idea where if somebody's on a team of any kind, everybody is rewarded as if they were the winner? What's your opinion? They don't get to experience failure, in my view, to learn from it. Have you given any thought to that? Do you counsel young people on anything like that?
Well, yeah, it's as I said before, I'm an educator, and so you're working with students, and my educational experience has been with college students more so, and looking at those sorts of things, of recognizing that everything, is not a winner. And as a parent, we had to counsel our daughters when they tried for various things and they were part of, and they didn't win. But the counseling part of saying, okay, fine, I mean, that's life. I think that there are ways to reward people. I don't think anyone wants the people, well, we do. We want to be rewarded. We want to feel good and feel as though that we are making all kinds of accomplishments. And I mean, that gives us incentive to continue to go on. But we also know in reality that does not work. I mean, that's pie in the sky. So to say that every time that there's competition, that everybody is a winner, may or may not work depending upon the circumstances as that. What we want, and I look back on an experience that you just mentioned, when I was in elementary school and I really wanted a part in the school's play and was denied it and was given to someone else. And I really was upset and angry, but I didn't know because I felt those, and other people felt that maybe I was the best person for that. But the teacher shared with me that that may have been, but here is Johnny who needed that. If you understand, they needed to have that opportunity and experience because I consistently have it all the time. And so I had to understand that. So I think in counseling and in working with students, and as the question that you asked in terms, should everybody get a trophy? It really depends to me on what the occasion and how we best reward people and giving them the incentive to go on. And just one last point. I just was listening to I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was mentioned that it was a student who became an entertainer who indicated that in the 7th grade that he wanted to make people laugh. He wanted to be a comedian and all of that. And he was so devastated when his teacher, because he had somewhat of a stuttering problem, told him, first of all, that he could not, why don't you not do that? And you won't be one. I mean, that was essence, just that. But he ended up being and that was Steve Harvey. We know is that story that's there. The problem is which leads to another issue, is we have been told that on an ongoing basis, and if we look at that as failure, look, it's fine. One last story that and I'm gonna tie in this to something that's coming up.
Okay.
At Redeemer, for the Martin Luther King celebration, we're bringing in Alexis Herman, who was the 23rd U.S. Secretary of Labor during the Clinton administration, and the first African American in that role. And we're all family friends from the same hometown, Mobile and all. She, in high school, was told, no, she had graduated from Xavier, and she went to apply for a job, and they told her, the recruiter told her, said, oh, yeah, you know, your picture look good, but probably what you should be is a secretary.
All of us females were told that. I'm the same generation.
You should know. You need to be a secretary, and I think he was, well, not obviously not think, but he was thinking more of the secretary, the clerical kind of thing. When Alexis now speaks occasionally, and she tells that story, she said, I want to go back and find him and tell him, yes, I'm a secretary, okay, but I'm the U.S. Secretary of Labor. So I say all of that to say that if you use those kinds of things in terms of failure and rejection, and let that define you and stop you from moving forward. And that happens to so many, you would be surprised, many people. But in my book, that's why I wanted to share my story. All my daughters and my wife insisted that I share my story so that it could be impactful for others across the board.
You talk a lot about mentors in your book. And as an adult, now I'm not asking you as when you were very young, but as an adult, who do you think was your most influential mentor? If you had to pick one, and why?
My grandfather. He was my role model and mentor. And what you see in terms of who I am today, and very people-oriented he was. I learned all of that from him and how he was a deacon in the church, and his whole life was being a public servant, giving and helping and sharing. All of that and I didn't recognize that at that time growing up, but he was the person that I consider as my number one role model and mentor.
Can you talk, well, I want to ask you one more question before I go to kind of a final question. You mentioned in the book that you got to know Coretta Scott King a little bit. I'm not sure if you got to know Martin Luther King or not from reading the book, but can you tell us about that and that interaction and how that influenced you?
I was in Montgomery, Alabama during the civil rights experience when Dr. Martin Luther King was the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. I came to Montgomery because, as I said, I'm from Alabama, from Mobile, and I went to Alabama State, which is in Montgomery. The school was in walking distance from the Capitol and from Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy's church. So that's how I was engaged. With an experience that I had being a part of the civil rights movement and students' demonstration and all of that during that time under his leadership. So yes, that's my interfacing with he and with Dr. Abernathy. We were in Dr. Abernathy's church, as you know, that was Martin Luther King's best friend, and they had churches maybe 2 or 3 miles from each other, if that far. And we were surrounded by state troopers with the whole 9 yards. And Martin Luther King announced at that point, he said, just be very quiet, that you're surrounded outside by the Ku Klux Klan and about police, all of that. And what happened was, that was one of the most frightening experiences, because you can imagine a junior in college and having that experience and all. But I experienced all of that during that. Yeah. When I moved to Atlanta, he had passed and all, and it was Mrs. King and the King family that we became very, very much involved and engaged with. My wife, my daughters, my friends, and so we worked very, very closely with the King Center and volunteered in any number of issues. So I got to know Mrs. King, Mrs. Farris, who is Martin Luther King's sister, and the King family. And I think we're aware that it's just had another death in the family with his son Dexter that passed, and in fact his memorial service is going to be next Friday. So, but yes, I became very actively involved with them.
And one final thing, which I hope you will let us know, what are you working on today? You recently moved to Sarasota 4 years ago, you said, so you're not a newbie anymore. But what are you working on here as far as community engagement that you might, I see people in this audience who might like to join you in whatever efforts you're doing. So can you tell us about what you're up to?
Well, as I said, I'm a public servant, as I announced initially, and no matter where I am, I've always been engaged in the community. And coming to Sarasota was a new thing for me because it was a new experience, and I say that was a part of my calling, that was a part of God's calling for me. People question, why are you leaving Atlanta? Everybody know you there, you all involved, you're engaged with blah, blah, blah. But I felt that what God had wanted me to do there, and he wanted me to come here to the unknown and begin to help. What I've done here is to first get involved with the church. I went the church was introduced to the church, which is right around the
Just
corner there.
Redeemer you're talking
Redeemer,
about, just
the Church
about
of
2
Redeemer,
blocks
which is 2 blocks
in this
away,
direction, right?
that has almost 3,000 members with a handful, and I mean a handful of African Americans there. But I felt as though that was my charge, and that was what I was brought here to do. And immediately, as I always do, I asked, what can I do? I'm not one to just come and go to service, but what can I do in the church? And Father Robinson said to me, I would like for you to chair Martin Luther King's celebration. We have this at the church, and certainly with what I hear about you and your involvement with you chair. And I said, I'll be more than happy to chair. But not only will I chair it, I will also bring Martin Luther King's one of his best friends and confidant, and who worked at the and he said, who? I said, Ambassador Andrew Young. Well, they almost fell off their chairs when I said that. But that started that, and as you see that what has happened as a result of that, and now we're having that. But this is not a church, and I want to get into answer to your question. Yeah. This is a community initiative, in the sense that what I've done is engage the community to be a part of this. The organizations, the NAACP, the ASALA, all of the sororities, fraternities, other organizations here, and asking them if they're getting involved in disseminating information about the event that we are doing here. Thank you, my wife.
So you recognize the voice out of the darkness, right?
To make this and a community initiative. And so that's what will happen in terms of having a diverse group of people, because that's the ultimate. Given the fact of celebrating one of America's heroes and continuing his principles and teaching. And so one of his dreams was that there will be a beloved community. That's key. Coming back to coming with my particular beginnings, what I shared, that's what I'm trying to do here. So I'm pulling in people around the things to say with the church, but also with that, it's engaging those people. For an example, when Ambassador Young came, and what Secretary Herman and Judge Hatchett are doing, they're going to be engaged in the community as well. They're going to meet with the students. Ambassador Young met with students in Newtown. That's what they're going to do. They were involved with the community leaders, of meeting with them. So it's bringing everybody together under the auspices of continuing the legacy and the teaching of Martin Luther King. So that's that part. I'm also involved I'm a member of 2 fraternities. One is Alpha Phi Alpha, and the other one is Sigma Pi Phi. Those are 2 African American males, professionals, fraternities, and with the same mission of working with the underserved, of giving back to the community, and pulling communities together. And then I'm also working with a particular group that's called Black Working Together in the Community to bring more communities, working with the NAACP, working not only with Black organizations, but white organizations as well. The whole idea is getting people at the table so that we could be a part of the decision-making process, where we could sit across the table and talk about how could we make Sarasota the paradise that we claim that we have, not only from the beauty of the center, the arts community, from the humanistic and the human relationship and love that we are as humans. So that's what I am doing here.
Well, it has been so delightful to chat with you and to hear about this mission. This is a fabulous mission that you have, to not just be an arts place, to not just be a beautiful place with beaches, but to be a place where humans can come together in a community and thrive. And I applaud you for doing that, and we're glad you're here. So,
Thank you.
a round of applause for Dr.
Thank you.
Clemons, and thank you so much for coming. And his book is for sale downstairs if you already don't have it, and I believe he will sign some
Oh,
if
absolutely.
you buy it.
Sure.
So, great, thank you.
Oh, well, listen, thank you as well, Georgia. It's a pleasure.
Will he take questions?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
We have a couple minutes for questions, yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, Doctor, your experience in community as a young person was unique and wonderful. What was your experience of community for your family and your daughters? And did they have a cohesive experience of community broader than most people might have today? And was the church an important factor?
Right. That we purposely did that for our children. That's our oldest daughter. Those values that was instilled in us, we also instilled in our children and in our family. The church was key. The school community volunteering, that was one of the things that my wife and I really insisted with it. So when you talk about the King Center, and we had with our friends here in the back from Atlanta, Dr. and Mrs. Young, and so we all worked together in the Jose Feeding the Hungry. Many of those, and our kids volunteered for that. We were part of an organization, like my wife and Sonia Young, they're the Jack and Jill, whose purpose were working out in the community volunteers. So our kids purposely were exposed to those kinds of things in terms of creating a particular community. They didn't experience what we experienced, growing up in the Jim Crow area. So they didn't have that. So we had to try to find ways to make sure that they understand the value of people giving back and sharing and loving and all of those sorts of things. And so we created that in our families.
Thank
Yes.
you. Just one more quick question.
I work with families in poverty at our homeless shelter. Have you had experience engaging young people in service in the community? Because I believe that service really provides a new outlook on life, and I think it would for those young people in poverty. But I'm at the stage where I'm just taking baby steps.
Yeah, I do. I think that through our organizations, we strongly, that because we work with a lot of the at-risk, underserved, and especially in Newtown, there and Bradenton, and as well where those areas exist. But what we try to do, even in those who are not a part of those particular communities, to give back. We work with the students at Booker High School and at Southeast High School, encouraging them to definitely volunteer and become involved with that. I think that one of the things that you mentioned about the homeless is that what we have done recently, we've gotten involved, and we're going to be getting more involved with the Resurrection House, which is here, and that's the place for the homeless, and that's one of the outreach initiatives that my church is doing. But the answer is yes to your question. We certainly
Volunteerism helps
want to
them.
definitely help and
Grow
push
and become.
more people of giving back and getting more involved in that.
Thank you. We have to close it down, but Dr. Clemons will be here signing, and I'm sure if you want to chat during that time for a
Yeah.
few minutes, you can.
Yeah, just a
Thank you.
reminder that the store closes at 6. So if you do want to grab a book and get some book signs, then
Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you.